You cheated on me. Declan's enraged words pierced the air like shrapnel, shredding the fabric of our once blissful family life. I recoiled, my mind spinning as I struggled to process the vicious accusation. What are you talking about? I would never betray you, I cried out, my voice trembling with disbelief. Declan thrust a medical report in my face, his eyes blazing with hurt and betrayal. Then how do you explain this? Lila's blood type proves she can't be my daughter. My heart plummeted as I scanned the document, the stark reality of the incompatible blood types undeniable. Confusion swirled within me, kaleidoscopic shards of doubt and denial whirling in my mind. There must be a mistake, I pleaded, grasping at any shred of rationality. We need to get a second opinion or run more tests. More tests? Declan scoffed, his face twisted with contempt. So you can fabricate more lies? I don't know what pathetic games you're playing, but I want you and that bastard child out of my house tonight. The venom in his words stung like acid, searing through the very fiber of my being. I opened my mouth to protest, but my throat constricted, robbing me of speech. How could the man I loved, the father of my child, hurl such vicious insults with such callous ease? Lila's muffled sobs drifted from her bedroom, a heartbreaking counterpoint to the maelstrom engulfing our home. Mustering every ounce of composure, I turned and went to her, cradling her tiny form as she clung to me, her tears soaking my blouse. "Mommy, why is Daddy so mad?" she whimpered, her innocent eyes brimming with fear and confusion. I stroked her hair, my own tears flowing freely now. "It's going to be okay, baby. Mommy's here," I whispered, the hollow reassurance tasting bitter on my tongue. The front door slammed, signaling Declan's departure. His mother, Eloise, regarded me with undisguised contempt, her judgmental stare searing into my soul. "I always knew you were trash," she spat, her words laced with venom. "God knows what other depraved secrets you're hiding." As she stormed out, I sank to the floor, cradling Lila in my arms, her tiny body racked with sobs. The walls seemed to close in around us, the once warm sanctuary of our home now a suffocating prison of shattered trust and broken dreams. That night, as I lay awake in the darkness, my mind replayed the horrors of the day in an endless, torturous loop. Declan's accusations, Eloise's scathing condemnation, they burrowed into my psyche like parasitic worms, gnawing at my sanity, my self-worth eroding with every agonizing second. Yet, amid the maelstrom of despair, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I was innocent, and no matter how insurmountable the odds, I would fight to prove it. For Lila's sake and for my own, I would not surrender to the shadows of doubt. As the first tentative rays of dawn seeped through the curtains, I rose from the bed, my resolution steeled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a hard-fought battle for truth, justice, and redemption. The next few days blurred into a waking nightmare. Declan's rage had not subsided, his accusations growing more venomous with each passing hour. Eloise fanned the flames, her hateful whispers poisoning his mind against me. "You'll never see that child again," Declan snarled, his face contorted with rage. "Not until you admit to your sordid betrayal." I pleaded, reasoned, and begged, but my words fell on deaf ears. In their eyes, I was the embodiment of sin, a deceitful serpent who had violated the sanctity of our marriage. One evening, as I was preparing Lila's dinner, Declan stormed into the kitchen, his eyes wild with fury. "Pack your things," he spat. "You and that bastard are leaving tonight." Reeling from the impact of his words, I clutched Lila protectively. "You can't do this, Declan. She's your daughter, for God's sake." His cruel laughter pierced the air, chilling me to the core. "My daughter? Don't make me laugh. That little brat is a constant reminder of your infidelity," Lila whimpered, burying her face in my embrace as Eloise glowered from the doorway. "You heard him, whore. Get out before we call the police." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I gathered our meager belongings, the weight of our shattered lives condensed into 2 battered suitcases. Lila clung to me, her tiny frame racked with sobs, her innocence shattered by the vitriol that surrounded us. As we stepped out into the night, the cold air stung my face, a harsh reminder of the cruel world that awaited us. Eloise's parting words sliced through the silence like a razor. "Don't ever show your face here again, you lying tramp." In the days that followed, we drifted from shelter to shelter, our once comfortable existence reduced to a daily struggle for survival. I reached out to Tara, my former colleague and confidant, who embraced us with open arms. "You're not alone in this, Mari," she vowed, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'll help you get back on your feet." True to her word, Tara secured us a modest apartment and arranged for me to interview at her marketing firm. As I sat across from the stern-faced interviewer, my heart raced with trepidation. "So, Mrs. Turner," he drawled, his gaze piercing, "care to explain this gap in your employment history?" I swallowed hard, bracing myself for the inevitable judgment. "My husband falsely accused me of infidelity and threw us out. I've been fighting to clear my name ever since." His eyebrows arched, and for a moment I feared the worst. But then, to my surprise, he nodded slowly. "I've seen my fair share of bitter divorces," he sighed. "Welcome to the team, Marielle. We could use a fighter like you." As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Tara's unwavering support and the promise of a fresh start had reignited the flames of determination. I would not be cowed by Declan's vile accusations or the harsh realities that now defined our existence. No, this was not the end. It was merely the first salvo in a war for justice, dignity, and the reclamation of our lives. And I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment and determination. Tara's steadfast friendship and the camaraderie of my new colleagues provided a much-needed anchor amidst the turbulence that had consumed my life. Yet, the shadow of Declan's accusations lingered, a constant specter that haunted my every waking moment. I knew that to reclaim my dignity and secure Lila's future, I needed more than moral support. I needed a legal strategy. "You're not alone in this fight," Tara assured me one evening over coffee. "I know someone who can help." A few days later, I found myself seated across from Vincent, a family lawyer whose reputation for tenacity preceded him. "Let's cut to the chase," he began, his gaze unwavering. "Declan's accusations are baseless, but proving paternity won't be easy." I nodded, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. "We'll need to demand a proper genetic test," Vincent continued, "and dig into Declan's background. Any skeletons in his closet could bolster your case." As the weeks progressed, I threw myself into the twin pursuits of work and legal preparations. Lila's well-being was my driving force, a beacon that guided me through the darkest moments. "Mommy, when are we going home?" she would ask, her innocent eyes brimming with confusion. "Soon, baby," I'd reassure her, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "Mommy's working on it." At the office, I poured my heart into every project, determined to prove my worth and silence the whispers that still lingered. Yet, not everyone was supportive. "Heard you're quite the little homewrecker," one colleague sneered during a team meeting. "Bet you're loving all the attention, you slut." The words sliced through me like razor blades, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. As tears blurred my vision, a firm hand gripped my shoulder. "That's enough, Carl." Tara's voice cut through the tension like a whip. "Unless you want a harassment suit on your hands, I suggest you keep your vile thoughts to yourself." In that moment, I realized the true depth of Tara's loyalty, a wellspring of strength that would sustain me through the darkest valleys that lay ahead. As the weeks bled into months, Vincent's investigations began to bear fruit. Financial records, travel receipts, and witness testimonies painted a damning portrait of Declan's activities, one that suggested his accusations were merely a smokescreen for his own indiscretions. "We've got him," Vincent declared, a predatory gleam in his eye. "It's time to take the fight to Declan and bury him under the weight of his own lies." A renewed sense of purpose coursed through my veins. No longer was I the victim, cowering in the shadows of doubt. I was a warrior, armed with the truth and fueled by a mother's love, a force to be reckoned with in the battle for justice and redemption. As I gazed into Lila's eyes that night, I made a silent vow. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifices, I would emerge victorious. For her sake, and for the sake of every woman who had been wronged by the cruelty of men, I would not rest until the scales of justice were balanced once more. The deeper we delved into Declan's past, the more sordid revelations came to light. What had initially seemed like a straightforward case of mistaken paternity quickly spiraled into a labyrinth of lies and deceit. "Look at this." Vincent growled one evening, slamming a stack of financial records onto the table. Unexplained cash withdrawals, luxury hotel charges. The paper trail points to something much darker than a simple affair. I pored over the documents, my stomach churning with each damning entry. The man I had once loved, the father of my child, was rapidly transforming into a stranger, a devious manipulator capable of unimaginable betrayal. "We need to dig deeper," I replied, my voice steely with determination. "No stone can be left unturned." In the weeks that followed, we assembled a mosaic of evidence, a tapestry woven from surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and digital footprints. The picture that emerged was one of a man consumed by greed, lust, and an insatiable appetite for deception. "He's been playing us all for fools," Vincent seethed, his fists clenched. The blood-type discrepancy was just a convenient cover for his own sordid affairs. My mind reeled as the truth unraveled, each revelation more gut-wrenching than the last. Declan's protestations of fidelity had been a carefully constructed facade, concealing a web of lies that stretched back years. "That bastard," I hissed, my fingers digging into the armrests. "All this time, he's been the one betraying us." Yet, amidst the maelstrom of anger and disillusionment, a glimmer of hope emerged. With the truth laid bare, we possessed the ammunition to dismantle Declan's house of cards, to strip away the veneer of righteousness and expose him for the duplicitous charlatan he truly was. "We're going to bury him," Vincent vowed, a predatory gleam in his eye. "He'll wish he never crossed paths with us." As the days ticked by, our case grew stronger, bolstered by irrefutable evidence and sworn testimonies. Declan's web of lies was unraveling, strand by damning strand, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. One evening, as I tucked Lila into bed, her innocent eyes brimmed with curiosity. "Mommy, why are you and Daddy fighting?" I swallowed hard, struggling to find the words to explain the betrayal that had shattered our lives. "Daddy did some very bad things," I began, choosing my words carefully. "But don't worry, sweetie, Mommy's going to make things right." Her small hand caressed my cheek, her touch a balm for the rawness that still lingered. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered, her voice laced with a wisdom far beyond her years. In that moment, I knew that no matter the obstacles, no matter the sacrifices, I would emerge victorious. For Lila's sake, and for the sake of every woman who had been wronged by the cruelty of men, I would not rest until justice was served. As I rose from her bedside, a renewed sense of purpose coursed through my veins. The time for tears and self-pity was over. Now was the moment to strike, to unleash the full force of our righteous fury upon the man who had so callously shattered our lives. Declan's reign of deception was nearing its end, and I would be the one to deliver the final devastating blow that would bring him to his knees. Justice, long denied, would finally be served. The weight of the evidence against Declan was staggering, a damning mosaic of lies and infidelity that threatened to unravel the very foundation of his carefully constructed charade. Yet, as the day of reckoning approached, a sense of trepidation gnawed at the edges of my resolve. "He's not going to go down without a fight," Vincent warned, his brow furrowed with concern. "Declan's got deep pockets and a nasty vindictive streak. Brace yourself for an all-out assault." His words proved prophetic. In the days leading up to the hearing, a torrent of allegations and character assassinations flooded the media, each more vicious than the last. Sources close to the family described Marielle Turner as an unfit mother with a history of promiscuity and substance abuse. One lurid headline screamed. I recoiled in disgust, my hands trembling, as I read the litany of falsehoods and half-truths that had been woven into a nightmarish tapestry of lies. "Don't let it get to you," Tara urged, her voice a steadying force amidst the storm. "They're just trying to rattle you." Yet, as the days ticked by, the onslaught intensified, each salvo more devastating than the last. Strangers would hurl insults as I passed on the street, their words cutting deeper than any knife. "Whore! Baby killer! Declan was too good for trash like you." The venom seeped into my pores, poisoning my mind with doubt and self-loathing. There were moments when the thought of surrender, of simply retreating into the shadows and letting Declan claim his hollow victory, seemed like a merciful release. But then, I would look into Lila's eyes, those pools of innocence that had been forever tainted by the cruelty of the world, and my resolve would harden once more. I won't let him win, baby, cradling her against me. Mommy's going to make everything right again. The night before the hearing, as I lay awake in the silence of our modest apartment, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was more than just a battle for custody or vindication. It was a war, a clash of ideologies that would reverberate far beyond the confines of our fractured lives. Declan embodied the worst aspects of patriarchal arrogance, the belief that wealth and status granted him the right to lie, cheat, and discard those who dared to challenge his authority. His actions were a poisonous manifestation of the toxic masculinity that had subjugated women for centuries, reducing us to mere chattels to be used and discarded at a man's whim. But I was the embodiment of a new order, a defiant spirit that refused to be cowed or silenced. In that moment, I understood that my battle transcended the personal. It was a clarion call for every woman who had been wronged, a beacon of hope that justice could prevail even in the darkest of times. As the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I rose from the bed, my eyes burning with resolve. The time for doubt and self-pity was over. The hour of reckoning had arrived. With Lila's hand clasped tightly in mine, I stepped out into the world, ready to face the storm that awaited us. Declan's reign of terror was about to end, and I would be the one to deliver the killing blow that would topple his empire of lies. This was more than just a courtroom battle. It was a war for the very soul of our society, a fight to exorcise the demons of misogyny and oppression that had festered for far too long. And I, armed with the truth and fueled by a mother's love, would be the avenging angel that rained judgment upon those who dared to subjugate and abuse. The time for justice had come, and I would not rest until the scales were balanced once more. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, each side bristling with barely contained hostility. Declan, impeccably groomed and flanked by his high-priced legal team, glowered at me from across the aisle, his eyes burning with contempt. As the proceedings commenced, his lawyers launched into a blistering assault, painting me as a morally bankrupt adulteress unfit for motherhood. Their words lashed like whips, each allegation more sordid than the last. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming," the lead counsel sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Mrs. Turner's promiscuity and utter disregard for the sanctity of marriage have irreparably damaged this family." I steeled myself, my fingers digging into the armrests as a tidal wave of rage threatened to consume me. But then Vincent rose to his feet, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. "Your Honor, the defense's claims are nothing more than a smokescreen, a desperate attempt to conceal the truth about Mr. Turner's own egregious transgressions." With a deft flick of his wrist, he produced a sheaf of documents, slamming them onto the evidence table with a resounding thud. Financial records, travel receipts, surveillance footage, all pointing to a sordid web of infidelity and deceit that stretches back years. A hush fell over the courtroom as the damning evidence was presented, each piece fitting together like a macabre jigsaw puzzle. Declan's face drained of color, his carefully cultivated veneer of respectability crumbling with each revelation. "You lying sack of filth," I hissed, my voice trembling with fury. "All this time, you've been the one cheating. The blood type was just a convenient excuse to cover your own tracks." Declan recoiled as if struck, his eyes darting frantically from face to face, searching for an ally in the sea of condemnation that surrounded him. I can explain," he sputtered, his composure cracking under the weight of the evidence. "Save your pathetic excuses," Vincent snarled, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "The truth is laid bare for all to see. You're nothing but a spineless coward who hid behind false accusations to mask your own sins." As the revelations continued to unfold, each more damning than the last, the courtroom descended into pandemonium. Eloise, her face contorted in a rictus of disbelief and horror, turned on her son with a fury that would have cowed lesser men. "How could you?" she raged, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You've disgraced our family, brought shame upon us all with your lies and debauchery." Declan shrank back, his bravado evaporating in the face of his mother's wrath. In that moment, he was no longer the swaggering titan who had so callously shattered our lives. He was a small, pitiful creature, exposed and vulnerable to the judgment of his peers. As the gavel thundered, restoring order to the courtroom, a hush fell over the proceedings. All eyes turned towards the judge, whose weathered face betrayed a lifetime of bearing witness to the depths of human depravity. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented," he intoned, his voice grave, "I have no choice but to rule in favor of Mrs. Turner. Full custody of the child, as well as a substantial settlement, will be awarded forthwith." A weight lifted from my shoulders, a burden that had pressed down upon me for far too long. As Declan was led away, his head bowed in shame, I turned to face the woman who had once been my mother-in-law. Eloise regarded me with a mixture of contrition and begrudging respect, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was wrong about you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." In that moment, I felt a pang of pity for the broken woman before me, a victim of her own toxic loyalty, blinded by her adoration for a son who had proven himself unworthy of such devotion. Extending my hand, I met her gaze with a steely resolve that brooked no argument. "Let's put the past behind us," I replied, my voice unwavering, "for Leela's sake." As our fingers intertwined, a bridge across the chasm of pain and betrayal, I knew that a new chapter was beginning. One forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the indomitable strength of a mother's love. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. There would be other Declans, other malignant forces bent on subjugating and oppressing those they deemed inferior. But I would be ready, a warrior armed with the truth and fueled by an unquenchable thirst for justice. No longer would I cower in the shadows, cowering from the stinging lash of misogyny and cruelty. No, from this day forward, I would stand tall and defiant, a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged, a living embodiment of the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. The reckoning had come, and I had emerged victorious, battered, perhaps, but unbroken and emboldened for the battles yet to come. In the aftermath of the courtroom battle, a surreal calm settled over our lives. Declan, disgraced and humiliated, had retreated into the shadows, his once formidable presence reduced to a mere specter haunting the fringes of our existence. The financial settlement, though substantial, felt like a hollow victory, a paltry compensation for the anguish and betrayal we had endured. Yet, as the dust settled and the harsh glare of public scrutiny faded, a new reality began to take shape. Eloise, her carefully constructed worldview shattered by the revelations of her son's duplicity, found herself adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Gone was the imperious matriarch who had once so vehemently condemned me. In her place stood a shell of a woman, haunted by the ghosts of her own misjudgments. "I owe you an apology," she murmured one afternoon as we sat across from each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I regarded her with a guarded expression, the wounds of her past transgressions still raw and throbbing. "For too long, I allowed my own prejudices to blind me to the truth," she continued, her voice tinged with regret. "I failed you, and more importantly, I failed Lila." A part of me yearned to unleash the torrent of pent-up fury that had festered for so long, to lash out and inflict upon her a fraction of the pain she had so callously inflicted upon us. But as I gazed into her haunted eyes, I saw not the imperious shrew who had once reveled in our suffering, but a broken woman, a victim of her own misguided loyalties and toxic ideologies. In that moment, a profound truth crystallized within me. Harboring hatred and resentment would only perpetuate the cycle of pain and oppression that had nearly destroyed us. "We've all made mistakes," I replied, my voice measured and even. "What matters now is how we move forward, as a family, for Lila's sake." Eloise's shoulders sagged, a tremulous sigh escaping her lips as a flicker of relief passed across her features. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've shown more grace and compassion than I ever deserved." As the weeks bled into months, a fragile truce took root between us. The path towards true reconciliation would be long and arduous, paved with the shattered remnants of our fractured trust. Yet, for Lila's sake, we persevered. Two warriors, battle-scarred and weary, united by a shared commitment to forge a better future for the innocent caught in the crossfire of our conflict. Slowly, tentatively, the walls began to crumble, and glimmers of the family we had once been started to emerge from the rubble of our shattered lives. Lila, ever resilient, took the first steps towards healing the breach, her boundless love and infectious laughter serving as a balm for the wounds that still lingered. "Grandma, come play with us," she would call out, her eyes sparkling with unbridled joy. And Eloise, her defenses worn down by the relentless onslaught of childish innocence, would inevitably acquiesce, setting aside her trepidation and embracing the moment with a cautious tenderness. In those stolen moments, I caught fleeting glimpses of the woman she might have been. A loving matriarch, untainted by the corrosive influence of prejudice and toxic masculinity. As for Declan, his presence lingered like a malignant shadow, a constant reminder of the depths of betrayal we had endured. Yet with each passing day, his hold over us weakened, his once formidable aura of invincibility eroded by the unstoppable march of time and truth. We were survivors, battle-hardened and emboldened by the fires of adversity. The chains of oppression that had once bound us lay shattered at our feet, the shackles of fear and self-doubt cast aside in favor of a newfound strength and resilience. And as I gazed out upon the world that had once seemed so hostile and unforgiving, I felt a surge of hope swell within me, a beacon of promise that illuminated the path ahead. The war had been won, but the battle for true equality and justice was far from over. There would be other Declans, other malignant forces bent on subjugating and oppressing those they deemed inferior. But we would be ready, a united front forged in the crucible of suffering and tempered by the indomitable strength of a mother's love. No longer would we cower in the shadows, cowering from the stinging lash of misogyny and cruelty. No, from this day forward, we would stand tall and defiant, beacons of hope for all those who had been wronged. Living embodiments of the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. The reckoning had come, and we had emerged victorious. Battered, perhaps, but unbroken and emboldened for the battles yet to come. The weight of the past year's tumultuous events seemed to dissipate as I stepped across the threshold of our new home, a cozy two-story nestled in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. This was more than just a fresh start. It was a physical embodiment of the hard-won victories that had carried us to this point. "What do you think, baby?" I asked, turning to Lila with a warm smile. Her eyes danced with unbridled delight as she took in the spacious surroundings, her tiny feet pattering across the hardwood floors. "I love it, Mommy," she exclaimed, twirling in a whirlwind of giddy excitement. Watching her, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude wash over me. This was the life she deserved. A sanctuary untainted by the specter of Declan's betrayal, a place where she could blossom and thrive without the weight of our past struggles bearing down upon her. "I'm glad you approve," I chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately. As the days melted into weeks, our new abode began to take on the warmth and character of a true home. Lila's vibrant artwork adorned the walls, splashes of color and whimsy that seemed to radiate a childlike joy. Yet, amidst the trappings of our fresh start, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of melancholy. The road that had led us here had been paved with pain and heartache, a crucible of suffering that had forged us into the warriors we had become. "You've come a long way, Mari," Tara murmured one evening as we sipped wine on the back patio, basking in the golden glow of the setting sun. I nodded, my gaze drifting to the horizon as memories of our shared struggles played out like a bittersweet symphony. "There were times when I didn't think I'd make it," I admitted, my voice tinged with a hard-won wisdom. "But you were there, every step of the way. I can never repay you for that." Tara's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and affection as she reached across the table, her hand enveloping mine in a warm, reassuring embrace. "You don't have to," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Seeing you rise from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever, that's all the reward I could ever want." As the weeks bled into months, I found myself rediscovering the passions and ambitions that had once defined me. With Lila's future secured and the specter of Declan's betrayal fading into a distant memory, I turned my sights towards the next chapter of my life. The marketing firm welcomed me back with open arms, and I threw myself into my work with a renewed vigor, channeling the hard-won lessons of my ordeal into a driving force that propelled me ever forward. "You've got fire in your belly, Turner," my boss remarked one day, a glint of admiration in his eye. "Keep this up, and you'll be running the show before you know it." As I climbed the corporate ladder, each rung a testament to my tenacity and resilience. A part of me couldn't help but revel in the delicious irony of it all. The very traits that Declan had sought to crush and subjugate, my strength, my independence, my unwavering spirit, were now the cornerstones of my success. Yet for all my professional triumphs, it was the quiet moments with Lila that truly brought me solace and fulfillment. Watching her blossom into a confident, vibrant young woman filled me with an indescribable sense of pride and wonder. "You're my hero, Mommy," she would whisper, her eyes brimming with adoration as she snuggled against me on the couch, our nightly ritual of story time and cuddles unfolding like a cherished tradition. In those moments, I felt a profound connection to the unbroken chain of strong, resilient women who had come before me, warriors who had fought and bled to carve out a space in a world that had sought to diminish and subjugate them. And as I gazed into Lila's innocent face, I silently vowed to honor their legacy, to be the embodiment of the unwavering spirit that refused to be cowed or broken. The years melted away, each one marked by triumphs and challenges, laughter and tears, the ebb and flow of life's rich tapestry. Yet, through it all, one constant remained, the bond between mother and daughter, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by an unbreakable love. As the twilight of my life began to cast its gentle glow, I found myself reflecting on the winding path that had brought me to this point. The struggles, the heartache, the hard-won battles, they had all been necessary steps on a journey that had tested the very limits of my strength and resilience. And as I looked out upon the world, I saw not just the scars of my own trials, but the countless other women who had faced their own battles, their own Declans to conquer. In that moment, I knew that my story was more than just a personal triumph. It was a rallying cry, a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged, oppressed, and subjugated. For in the end, it was not the weight of our burdens that defined us, but the indomitable spirit that refused to be crushed beneath them. We were warriors, forged in the crucible of adversity, our scars a testament to the battles we had waged and the victories we had won. And as I took my final breath, secure in the knowledge that my legacy would live on through Lila and the generations to come, I felt a sense of profound peace wash over me. The war was won, the battles had been fought, and in the end, justice and resilience had prevailed. We were the unbroken, the unbowed, and our stories would echo through the ages as a reminder of the indomitable strength of the human spirit.
I am Lily, and I'm 23 years old. I recently completed my second year of college studying painting, and I must say that it has been an amazing experience. However, before I go into that, you need to understand my background. I never felt at home in the house where I grew up. My parents, Julie, who is older than me, have always expressed their love for me. She has been a problem for me since the day I was born, and she is 5 years older than me. Julie appeared to despise me right away. She used to tease me, smash my toys, and generally ruin my life. Oh, that's just how sisters are. My parents would dismiss it with a joke, but it wasn't typical. I still recall my intense crush at the age of 15 on Scott, a boy I went to school with. He was the cutest guy ever, in my opinion. I secretly drew hours of pictures of him and stashed them beneath my mattress, confident no one would discover them. But Julie did what you know when she discovered them. She posted them for public viewing on the school bulletin board. I can still picture the people whispering, pointing, and laughing as I walked into the school that day. My entire universe seemed to be collapsing. "Lily, I saw the drawings," remarked a shaky and apprehensive Scott as he approached me. "You know, I don't like you that way, even if you're sweet and all." It was a day I ran home in tears. My folks were in the kitchen when I arrived home. With tears streaming down my cheeks, I yanked open the door. "Mom, Dad, Julie made me look bad at school." My own sketches were discovered by her. But before I could say anything further, Julie entered the room with a smug expression. She spoke with the moniker I detested, saying, "Oh, come on, Teresa. It was only mildly enjoyable. It's not my fault if you find jokes offensive." And what did my folks do, do you know? They chuckled. They genuinely chuckled. You really need to toughen up, my mom replied, wiping tears of amusement from her eyes. Julie is not to blame for your extreme sensitivity. I was overjoyed to be admitted into an art college for this reason. It was my means of leaving that home and the incessant taunting and humiliation. The only person who ever shown me genuine concern was my grandmother. It was her who told me I had talent and who appreciated my work. She insisted on paying for my tuition as soon as I was admitted. Lily, you have a gift, she remarked, her eyes shining. Never listen to someone who says otherwise. I'll see to it that you receive the education you are due. She covered all of my costs for 4 years, including my tuition, art supplies, and a small amount for living expenses. But then she fell ill, right before my senior year. I recall holding her frail hand while I sat by her bedside. Lily, my dear, I'm so proud of you, she added, casting a warm gaze on me. You're going to achieve amazing things. Larry, Maria, I need you to promise me something, she added, turning to face my parents, who were positioned at the foot of the bed. Make me a promise that you will cover Lily's last year. She must complete her schooling. Both of my parents gave a solemn nod. Obviously, Mom, my father replied. We swear. 7 days later, Grandma passed away. We learned that Mother had left Julie and me her jewelry, and my parents her house when her will was read. Naturally, Julie snatched up the diamond tiara right away. I accept this, she murmured. The ring can be Lily's. Teresa, you do realize that she doesn't really care for jewelry? I didn't dispute. She was accurate. I grabbed the diamond ring and placed it in a safety deposit box at the bank because I wasn't big on jewels. In college, I made friends quickly. There was Brian, a shy person who could make sculptures that would blow your mind, and Lily, a punk rocker with a gift for abstract art. To them, I was just Lily, the girl who could paint like it was no big deal. And they couldn't care less about the drama in my family. One day, Lily called me Linda, a moniker I kind of liked. A tattoo shop in the downtown area is in need of a designer. You ought to submit an application. I was first dubious. If my parents found out that I was employed in a tattoo parlor, they would go crazy. Then again, I wondered, why should it matter what others think? I applied, and much to my surprise, was hired. After seeing my portfolio, the owner, a large man named Ryan, who had more tattoos than skin, told me, "You're hired, kid." I was earning money for myself for the first time in my life. It was mine, even though it wasn't much. I kept it a secret from Julie and my parents. Julie's mocking voice was already in my head when she said, "Oh, little Teresa's drawing pictures for tough guys now." How adorable. My time at college was enjoyable. With the intention of making my grandmother proud, I immersed myself into my studies. My work was well received by my professors, and I even took home a couple minor prizes. Above all, though, I felt content. The years passed fairly quickly, and I found myself nearing the end of my second year. I had to go home, and as summer break drew near, a familiar dread sank in my gut. I entered pandemonium as soon as I opened the door. Everyone was crammed into the living room, looking enthusiastic and bustling. Julie stood in the midst of it all, holding up a white frock and grinning broadly. The first person to notice me was my mother. She smiled faintly and replied, "Oh, Lily. You're at your house. You weren't expected to arrive so quickly." I was dumbfounded as I stood there. Julie was going to be a wife. When did this occur? Julie grinned and smirked as she turned to face me. "Oh, you were unaware of this?" We must have forgotten because we have all been so preoccupied with the preparations. I experienced a gut punch sensation. Not even one person had bothered to inform me that my own sister was getting married. "Who is the fortunate one?" I asked, attempting to maintain a calm tone of voice. "This is Paul," Julie introduced a tall, attractive man I had not previously noticed. "Isn't he amazing?" Paul smiled politely at me and held out his hand. "Lily, nice to meet you. I've been hearing a lot about you." I shook his hand, unsure of what he had heard precisely. I knew Julie had probably heard nothing positive. The noise of animated conversation downstairs greeted me the following morning. At the breakfast table, Julie was presiding over our parents and a few of her bridesmaids. I overheard them talking and found out that Julie had broken up with her last lover because our parents insisted on it. It seems that he had relationships with some risky individuals. "Blessed be God that you paid attention to us, my love." Mom patted Julie's hand. "Paul is a much better fit for you, and he has a very prosperous family." I had no choice but to roll my eyes. It makes sense that was their concern. Julie turned to face me and grinned broadly. "Talking about Paul, he's bringing me out to dinner tonight. Teresa, you wouldn't really know anything about that? Have you still not found a partner?" They all laughed, and I clenched my coffee cup while attempting to hold back my tears. Certain things are always the same. As the days passed, I made an effort to avoid getting in anyone's way. I drew and counted down the days till I could leave in my room for the majority of that period. However, I was unable to skip the family meal one evening. Julie broke the momentous news to us all seated around the table. She declared, "I've decided to wear Grandma's jewelry to the wedding. That will look amazing with my dress." "Oh, what a brilliant idea that is," Mom yelled. Julie, nevertheless, wasn't done. What could improve it even further, you ask? If I had an accessory that matched it, like, a ring, I guess. With my fork halfway to my mouth, I froze. I could see where this was going. Mom's eyes glowed. "Yes, it is correct. Did your grandmother not leave you a ring, Lily?" I nodded slowly, my stomach churning. "There you have it," Julie exclaimed, clapping her hands. "Teresa, will you lend the ring to me for the wedding?" I stopped using my fork. "Borrow? How long will it last?" Julie laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, cunning Teresa, you'll give it to me permanently after all." I muttered, "But Grandma left that to me." "Come on, Lily," Dad said sternly. "Don't be selfish. It's your sister's wedding day." I looked around the table, hoping to find someone, anyone on my side, but all I saw were expectant faces waiting for me to give in, like always. "Lily," Dad said, his voice colder, "either you give the ring to your sister, or we won't pay for your final year of college." The room fell silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But you promised Grandma," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. Julie let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, please. No one cares about promises made to some old woman." I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. "How dare you talk about Grandma like that?" I shouted. "That's enough," Dad roared. "Lily, you have a choice to make. The ring or your education. Decide."
I looked at their faces. Dad's anger, Mom's disappointment, Julie's smug satisfaction. In that moment, I knew I had lost again. With shaking hands, I took off the necklace where I kept the key to my safety deposit box. I handed the key to Julie. The morning after the ring incident, I found Julie in the kitchen. "When exactly is your wedding?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Julie looked up from her coffee with a smug smile. "It's on the 30th. Why? Planning to ruin it?" I ignored her jab. 3 weeks, I said. I have 2 weeks to get away from this toxic environment. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm going to visit a friend from college. I'll be back in time for the wedding." That afternoon, I packed my bags and left, heading to my friend Lily's place in the next city. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Lily and I spent the week exploring art galleries, visiting local cafes, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed, but my peace was shattered. A week later, I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw it, photos of Julie's wedding. My sister looked radiant in white, with the diamond tiara sparkling on her head and my ring on her finger. The caption read, "Just married, off to the Maldives with my hunky husband." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. With shaking hands, I dialed my mom's number. "Why didn't you invite me to the wedding?" "Julie gave me the wrong date," I said, my voice trembling. There was a long pause, then Dad's voice came on the line. "Lily, your sister didn't want you there. She said you'd ruin her perfect day. We thought it was best not to tell you." I felt sick. "How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter too." "Don't be dramatic," Mom chimed in. "It's not like you really wanted to be there anyway, right?" I hung up, my whole body shaking with anger and hurt. A few days later, I returned home only to find that Julie had also come back from her honeymoon. I walked into the living room and saw her with Mom and Dad, looking at apartment listings. I cleared my throat and they all looked up. "Don't forget about my tuition," I said quietly. "You promised to pay for my last year if I gave Julie the ring." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Lily, we've decided to use that money as a down payment on Julie's apartment instead." It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "But you promised. You swore to Grandma." "Plans changed," Mom said dismissively. "Julie needs it more. I'm sure you can figure something out." Julie was still laughing, a cruel, mocking sound that made my blood boil. I knew exactly what I was doing when I lunged at her, grabbing a fistful of her hair. Julie screamed, and suddenly everyone was shouting. Dad pulled me away, his face red with anger. "That's enough," he roared. "Lily, get out of this house right now." I ran to my room, threw some clothes into a bag, and stormed out, slamming the front door behind me. As I walked away from the house, my heart pounding and tears streaming down my cheeks, I realized something. I ended up back at Lily's place, feeling completely lost and broken. For days, I barely left her guest room, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the walls. Lily did her best to comfort me, but nothing seemed to help. A week passed in this haze of despair. Then one morning, as I listlessly checked my email, I saw a message that made my heart stop. "Congratulations! You are the winner of the annual art school competition. Your prize includes a full scholarship for your final year of studies." I read the email 5 times, not believing my eyes. Then I let out a scream that brought Lily running. I handed her my phone, happy tears streaming down my face. I won a scholarship. I can finish school." Lily's eyes widened as she read the email. Then she pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh my God, Linda, this is amazing." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I could finish my degree without my parents' help. I could make my own way. When the new semester started, I threw myself into my studies with renewed energy. Between my classes and my part-time job at the tattoo parlor, I barely had time to think about my family drama. Months passed, and I slowly started to heal. One day, I was hanging out with my classmate Scott, who worked part-time at a local pawn shop. We were chatting about our day when he mentioned something that caught my attention. "You won't believe what happened during my shift today," he said. "This girl came in with the most beautiful diamond necklace and ring I've ever seen. Must have been worth a fortune." My heart skipped a beat. "What did she look like?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Scott described a woman who sounded exactly like Julie. "Can you draw the jewelry for me?" I asked, my hand shaking slightly. Scott looked confused but agreed. As I watched him sketch, my suspicions were confirmed. The necklace was the one Julie had always bragged about, and the ring, it was my grandmother's ring. I asked, my mouth dry, "Is there any way you could get me the security footage from the pawn shop?" Scott must have seen the desperation in my eyes because he finally nodded. "Okay, I'll see what I can do." A few days later, Scott handed me a USB drive. "Here," he said, "but you didn't get this from me, okay?" I nodded gratefully and rushed back to my dorm room. With trembling hands, I plugged in the drive and opened the video file. There was Julie, clear as day, handing over the jewelry. But what shocked me even more was what happened next. As she turned to leave, a man entered the frame. Julie threw her arms around him, kissing him passionately. It wasn't Paul. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding. As the man turned slightly, I recognized him. It was Julie's ex-boyfriend, the one her parents had forced her to break up with because of his criminal connections. I sat back, my mind spinning. Julie had sold her precious jewelry, including my grandmother's ring, and was apparently cheating on her husband with her criminal ex-boyfriend. Part of me wanted to immediately send this video to my parents, to Paul, to everyone who had ever believed Julie's lies, but another part of me hesitated. This was big, too big, to act on impulsively. Months passed, and I thought I had put my family drama behind me. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Laura, my mom's sister. "Lily, darling, I have wonderful news," she chirped, her voice full of excitement. "Your sister is pregnant. Can you believe it? They're having a big announcement party next week. Isn't it exciting?" My heart sank. Of course, another family event I hadn't been invited to. "That's great, Aunt Laura. Thanks for letting me know." After hanging up, I sat on my bed, conflicted. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue cutting ties with my toxic family, but another part of me, the part that still held on to the video from the pawn shop, knew this might be my chance. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing outside my parents' house. Cars lined the street, and I could hear laughter and chatter from inside. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Mom opened the door, her smile fading as soon as she saw me. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Without answering, I pushed past her and stepped inside. I walked into the living room, and the chatter quickly died down as everyone noticed me. Julie, standing in the center of the room with Paul, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What is she doing here?" Julie hissed. Dad's voice boomed through the room. "Lily, get out of this house immediately. You're not welcome here." Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. I saw Paul's parents exchange worried glances. Mom, always concerned about appearances, forced a fake smile. "I'm so sorry, everyone. We've had to distance ourselves from Lily. She's become quite greedy and unworthy of our family name." The room erupted into arguments. Some relatives defended me while others sided with my parents. I raised my voice. "I have something to say." Gradually, the room quieted down and all eyes were on me. I turned to Julie. "Congratulations on your pregnancy, sis. But I have to ask, why aren't you wearing Grandma Tara's ring?" Julie's face went pale. Her mother-in-law spoke up. "Now that you mention it, I haven't seen that beautiful ring in a while. Julie, dear, where is it?" Julie stuttered. "I sent them for restoration." "They needed cleaning." I nodded slowly, pulling out my phone. "That's interesting because I have a video here that tells a different story." The color drained from Julie's face as I connected my phone to the TV. The security footage from the pawn shop began to play. There was Julie, clear as day, pawning the jewelry. Then the moment that made everyone in the room gasp, Julie throwing herself into the arms of a man who was definitely not Paul, kissing him passionately. The moment the video ended, chaos erupted in the living room. Paul's face twisted with rage and pain as he turned to Julie. "Julie, what is this? Who is that man?" he shouted, his voice cracking. Julie burst into tears, mascara streaming down her face. "I can explain." Paul's mother moved closer, speaking in a stern tone. "I think we all deserve an explanation, Julie." The stern-looking man who was Paul's father spoke up. "I think we need a paternity test immediately." While accusations were being made and tensions were rising, I stealthily left the house. I had accomplished my goal. The truth was known. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders for the first time in years. The whole scope of Julie's deceit became apparent to the family over the course of the following few weeks. After some research, I learned that Julie had been meeting her ex-boyfriend, the one with the criminal connections, in secret and behind Paul's back. She had been taking advantage of Paul with his money, even pawning her jewelry to settle his bills. The deciding factor was the paternity test findings. The baby belonged to her ex-boyfriend, not Paul. Understandably distraught, Paul filed for divorce. Citing financial theft and emotional losses, he filed a large-scale lawsuit against Julie. After learning about the pregnancy, Julie's ex-boyfriend vanished into thin air, leaving her to handle everything alone. Julie's actions forced my parents, who had always supported her, to confront the hard truth. In order to assist Julie in paying Paul's demands, they were compelled to take out a large loan. They were left to pick up the bits when their golden child fell. Strangely enough, they attempted to hold me accountable for everything. My mother left a voicemail on my phone, sounding resentful and accusatory. "Lily, are you pleased now? Your sister's life has been ruined. I'm hoping you feel good about yourself." I didn't reply and erased the note. I was no longer able to be harmed by their comments. In my case, I went back to college, concentrated on my coursework, and began creating the life I want. I stopped communicating with my family and updated both my email and phone number. At last, the poisonous cycle was broken. 4 years have passed since the day I revealed Julie's deceit. My final effort won accolades from academics and local art critics, and I graduated with honors from art college. I currently work at the city's Harmony Art Gallery as a 25-year-old. It's an actualized dream. Every day, I'm surrounded by stunning artwork because I assist in curating exhibitions and planning events for upcoming artists. That's not all, though. I've begun painting in my spare time, and to my surprise and happiness, a few collectors have expressed interest in my work, but I still remember my roots. In my leisure time, I still draw tattoos. It's developed into a treasured pastime that serves as a reminder of my progress and a link to the past. It always makes me happy to see that some of my designs have been published in tattoo magazines. My family's tale is more nuanced than that. A few aunts and cousins who supported me during the aftermath are people I've stayed in touch with. They keep me informed about the family strife, but I make an effort to ignore it. Julie is still residing with our parents, from what I've heard. Her child is being raised by her alone while she is unemployed. Her parents, who are also having financial difficulties, are often putting pressure on her to get a job and move out. I've been told that the arguments are regular and acrimonious. Since then, I haven't spoken to Julie or my parents. They initially made several attempts to get in touch with me, leaving irate voicemails and guilt-tripping messages, but I was steadfast in my resolve to break things up. They eventually gave up trying. On the plus side, I've been dating Frank for the past year, and he's amazing. I met this graphic designer at an event at a gallery. He is understanding, helpful, and most importantly, he shares my enthusiasm for the arts. In fact, we're planning to move in together shortly, which seems like a step in the right direction toward creating the life I desire.
At our house, nestled on the outskirts of a large metropolis, it was just another Monday evening. Kevin and I had become accustomed to our daily routine. After a hard day at his auto repair business, he was unwinding with a beer on the couch, while I, Linda, was glued to my laptop, monitoring the most recent index and forex currency fluctuations. Our lives were drifting apart, and our cozy 3-story home felt like a battlefield. We had chosen it because it offered a bright future. "So how's the market today?" Though Kevin inquired in a casual manner, I could feel the tension beneath. We've become accustomed to this, ups and downs as usual. I tried to remain calm and said, "Forex is looking good though." Kevin scoffed and put down his beer with a little too much force. "Forex once more. Linda, you are aware that not everything that sparkles is gold." With a sigh, I closed my laptop and prepared myself for a talk we'd had far too often. Even though you can't fix every automobile that comes into your business, you nevertheless choose to fix it because you think it has value. How come you don't think my work is worthwhile? Because, Linda, automobiles exist. You are able to handle, repair, and sell them. It's really foolish what you're doing, throwing our money into the wind and hoping for more. The usual debate was getting old, and I felt my anger rising. "Carlos, Kevin, it's not careless. It's planned. Investing and gambling are not the same things. I hope you will make an effort to grasp that. Kevin got up and began to pace. Meanwhile, you refer to investing our hard-earned money in a volatile asset like Forex currency as calculated. I do indeed. Since I don't enter blindly, I conduct research, examine trends, and come to wise judgments. It's exactly the same as what you do in your store. Linda, my store is a definite thing. People require automobiles. There is always a demand for auto repairs, which is good news for my shop. However, this currency item for Forex, it's only a temporary state. When it crashes, what occurs? What happens next? Kevin, any investment could result in a loss. Hard times could even befall the shop. Though nothing is sure, my investments have yielded strong returns. Is that not worth something? In annoyance, Kevin stopped pacing and ran a hand through his hair. Linda, it's not all about the money. It's all about security, and not throwing everything away on a whim. Why can't we expand and make additional investments in the store? That's a genuine, reliable method of increasing our wealth. And put our entire basket in one basket. What would happen if the store suffered damage? Kevin, it's crucial to diversify. That is the fundamentals of investment. He shook his head, feeling as though there was more distance between us now. Yes, diversification. But not into this digital foolishness, but into something solid. I felt compelled to stand up and protect my independence and decisions. For someone who runs his own business, you're really closed-minded. He shot back, and you're really stubborn. All I'm saying is we could be using that money to build something lasting, something real, not just numbers on a screen. The conversation was stalling, as usual. All right, let's just decide to disagree. You don't criticize my investments, and I won't criticize the way you run your store. Kevin exhaled, his energy from the fight ebbing away. All right, but keep this in mind, Linda. Don't claim I didn't warn you when everything blows up in your face. The strain in our lives extended beyond the tension that existed between Kevin and me. The dynamics of his family threw another knot in the tension. We visited his parents and sister frequently because we lived close to them, and every time we did, I was reminded of how differently we thought about family and responsibility. Kevin recommended we go see his parents one Friday afternoon. Just thinking about it knotted my gut. I didn't mind Kevin's parents. It was his sister Karen. Her choices and way of life have always puzzled me. Go on, Linda. We haven't seen them in a very long time, and Mom has been inquiring about you. You are aware that Dad is battling cancer, Kevin persisted, sensing my reluctance. Kevin picked up on my sarcasm as I murmured, Yeah, I bet Karen missed me too. Look, I know you two don't get along, but can't you just? I don't know. Try for me, he sighed. I concurred. Okay, but if she begins talking about one of her buying binges, I'm not staying. Karen was there when we got there, flaunting her newest fancy purse. I was immediately irritated by her smug superiority complex. Observe this. I only received it yesterday. Noticing us hardly at all, she exclaimed. Isn't it amazing? It's something, I said, trying not to get irritated. Unaware of the atmosphere, Kevin's mother greeted us. I'm so happy Linda could make it, sweetie. You should get together more frequently. Karen took over the conversation, rambling on about her most recent trip and her shopping exploits, and the day stretched on. I spoke very little and tried to remain composed, but I was getting impatient. So, Linda, still playing with your index and bits? Karen gave a snide, disdainful tone. Karen, it's known as investing. I shot back, my frustration seeping out. You should try it someday instead of squandering money on stuff you don't need. I saw Kevin's warning glance, but it was too late. Karen snorted. Making investments? Please. Like playing online slots is something to take pride in. When I spend money, at least I can display my investment. Unable to resist, I shot back. Something to show until it goes out of style next season. That's enough, both of you. Kevin's dad interrupted, his tone harsh. We're here to enjoy each other's company, not to argue. The remainder of the visit was spent in awkward silence. Kevin couldn't contain his annoyance as we drove away. Why do you have to agitate her, Linda? Could you please give it up for one afternoon? Me provoke her? She's the one who started it with her snide remarks. I'm just not going to sit there and take it. Sometimes I wish you'd try a little harder for the sake of peace. Try harder, Kevin. I'm not the one splurging on luxuries and flaunting them in everyone's face. Why doesn't anyone tell her to stop acting like a spoiled brat? Because she's family, Linda. We look out for each other, even if we don't always agree with what they're doing. That's the thing, Kevin. Looking out for each other is one thing, but enabling bad behavior is another. There's a difference, and it's about time someone pointed it out to her. Kevin sighed, weariness clear in his voice. I know. But what can we do? She's set in her ways, and Mom and Dad aren't going to change how they treat her. It's not just about Karen. It's about us too. How are we supposed to plan for our future when there's always going to be this financial black hole in your family? We'll figure it out, Linda. We always do. The news hit us hard and fast. Kevin's dad, Mr. Thomas, had lost his battle with cancer. One moment we were talking about treatment options, and the next, we were mourning. Amid the shock and grief, Karen took charge of the funeral arrangements. It wasn't long before she dropped a bombshell. Sitting in our living room, Kevin looked like a storm cloud had settled over him. Linda, Karen says the funeral is going to cost $90,000. She expects us to cover half. I almost choked on my tea. $90,000? Kevin, that's crazy. Are we paying for a funeral or a royal wedding? Kevin's face darkened, his eyes narrowing. Now's not the time, Linda. This isn't about the money. It's about giving my dad the send-off he deserves. $90,000? There has to be a mistake. That's just too much. Kevin's voice rose, and I could see the vein in his forehead pulsating. My dad just died, Linda, and here you are arguing over money. What's wrong with you? I flinched at his harshness. I'm not arguing, Kevin. I'm just shocked. We've never even spent that kind of money on our own house. Kevin stood up abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. You know what? I don't need this. I don't need you telling me what's too much for my father's funeral. If you can't look past your spreadsheets for once, maybe you should just stay out of it. His words hurt, but I swallowed my response. This was grief talking, not my Kevin. I'm sorry, Kevin. I'll transfer the $50,000 to Karen. It's just, this is a lot to take in. Kevin paced the room, his hands buried in his hair. A gesture of frustration I knew all too well. Yeah, well, it's not just about the money, Linda. It's about doing right by him. And if that means paying whatever it costs, then so be it. When I confirmed the transfer to Karen, Kevin barely acknowledged it. He seemed lost in his own world of grief and anger. The distance between us felt immense, even though we were just a few feet apart in our living room. Walking into the funeral agency, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The past few days had been a blur of grief and confusion, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to find out. "I'm here for Mr. Thomas's funeral," I told the woman behind the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up from her computer with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're a day late. Mr. Thomas was cremated yesterday." My heart stopped. "What? But I was told the funeral was today." She shook her head gently, her eyes full of sympathy. "The family requested to move the date forward. I'm very sorry for your loss and the confusion." I stood there in shock, my mind racing. How could Kevin not tell me? Why was I kept in the dark about such an important change? Fuming, I dialed Kevin's number, my finger shaking with anger and disbelief. "Kevin, why didn't you tell me the funeral was moved? I just showed up like a fool, only to find out I missed everything." Kevin's voice was cold and distant. "Because I didn't think you cared, Linda. All you've done is complain about the costs and question every decision. Why would I think you'd want to be there? Because he was my father-in-law. Because I'm your wife. How could you just leave me out like that?" My voice cracked, a mix of hurt and fury. "Well, maybe not for long," he shot back, and I could hear the bitterness in his voice. "What's that supposed to mean?" I demanded, my heart sinking. "I'm done, Linda. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's so indifferent. You care more about your bitcoins and index than this family. I got the divorce papers ready." His words hit me like a slap in the face. Divorce? Was he serious? "You're kidding, right? Over this? Kevin, we can talk about it. We can work things out." "No, Linda. It's too late. The house is going up for sale. We'll split everything and go our separate ways." That was it. I was speechless, the reality crashing down on me. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Stunned, I wandered back to the parking lot, feeling lost. As I was heading back to my car, I saw Karen pulling in, driving a brand new luxury car. The sight of it made my blood boil. "Nice car, Karen. Where'd you get the money for this? Inheritance?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she casually tossed her hair back. "Yeah, something like that. Dad left me a little something." The way she talked about her father while carrying shopping bags without a hint of sadness was infuriating. "A little something, huh? Looks like mourning is treating you pretty well." Karen's smile faded, replaced by a smirk. "Well, we all grieve in our own ways, don't we? Some of us invest in index, and some of us in cars." I clenched my fists, the unfairness of it all burning inside me. This was all wrong. Kevin and I were falling apart, and here was Karen benefiting from the chaos. "Enjoy the car, Karen. Looks like it cost a pretty penny. Or should I say a pretty dollar?" I said, my voice cold. She laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty parking lot. "Oh, Linda, always so worried about money. Don't worry, it's all been taken care of." I watched her walk away, her laughter lingering in the air. The man I loved wanted nothing to do with me, and the family I had tried to be a part of was showing their true colors. The days after the funeral felt like I was walking through a thick fog of disbelief and betrayal. The weight of the divorce papers in my bag felt like a heavy burden, a constant reminder of my crumbling marriage. But the sight of Karen's new luxury car planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't ignore. Determined to find out what was really going on, I decided to visit the funeral home, hoping to uncover some answers. Walking into the funeral home, a mix of suspicion and determination fueled my steps. It felt surreal being there under these circumstances, but I needed answers. The place was quiet, the air filled with a solemn stillness that matched its purpose. At the reception desk, I saw a familiar face. Joyce, a classmate from high school. It was unexpected to see her there. "Joyce," I exclaimed, a bit too loudly for the setting. "I didn't know you worked here." She looked up, surprise crossing her face before she recognized me. "Linda. Wow, it's been ages. What brings you here? Is there something I can help with?" I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the conversation ahead. "Yeah, actually, it's about my father-in-law's funeral. I've heard my father-in-law's funeral was arranged here." Joyce's expression became professional, but I could see a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Sure, let me pull up the details. Give me a sec." As she typed, I fidgeted, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. When she found the record, her brows furrowed. "Okay, here it is. The service was pretty standard. Cremation was requested, keeping things simple. The total came to $110,000. My heart sank. $110,000? But that's not what we were told. We paid $90,000, or at least we were led to believe that's what it cost." Joyce paused, her face filled with concern. "That's a huge difference. It was Karen who handled the arrangements, right? Everything here is billed at $10,000, no more." The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. "Can you print me a copy of that bill? I need proof." "Sure thing," Joyce said, her tone sympathetic. She quickly printed out a copy and handed it to me. Holding the paper, it felt like I just found a key piece of a puzzle that could unravel a bigger deception. "Thanks, Joyce. I need to sort this out." Armed with the printout from the funeral home, my next step was confronting the family, especially Karen. The air felt heavy as I drove to my mother-in-law's house, where I knew they'd all be gathered, probably discussing the estate and the aftermath of the funeral. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and determination. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. I hesitated at the door, gathering my courage before stepping inside. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the hallway, announcing my arrival. In the living room, Kevin, Karen, and my mother-in-law were seated, looking like a picture of mourning that was about to be shattered. My mother-in-law, her eyes shadowed with grief, broke the silence first. "Dear, we missed you yesterday at the funeral. We thought you'd be there." Taking a deep breath, I replied, "I was told it was today. I'm so sorry for your loss." My voice was steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I then turned to Kevin. "Can we talk in private?" I hoped to spare his mother any more distress. Kevin's response cut through the room. "No secrets here. You're not part of this family anymore." I remembered his words, stunned, but I pushed on, pulling out the bill from the funeral home. "Then explain this to me. The funeral cost $10,000, not the $90,000 Karen claimed. Where did the rest go?" Kevin looked genuinely shocked, turning to Karen with a bewildered expression. "What's this about?" Karen squirmed under our gazes. "I needed the money," Karen finally admitted, her voice small. Her confession hung in the air, heavy with tension. Kevin's mom, overhearing, added, "Your father saved for his own funeral. I even gave Karen $115,000 more to cover everything." I did the maths out loud, feeling the tension rise. $100,000 in total and only $110,000 spent. Karen, where's the rest? Flustered, Karen admitted to spending the money on a new car for herself, her eyes avoiding mine. I expected Kevin to explode, but instead, he gently told Karen, You shouldn't have done that. Be more careful next time. His response shocked me. Careful? She committed fraud, Kevin, and you're okay with that? Kevin's justification left me stunned. You wouldn't understand. You've got no family. You don't get what it means to stick together. That was the last straw. In front of everyone, I signed the divorce papers with a flourish. Karen, you owe me $50,000. Pay up, or I'm going to the police. Kevin's protests followed me as I walked out, but I didn't look back. I had seen and heard enough. The betrayal was complete, and so was my resolve. As I walked away, the finality of my decision settled in. There was no going back, only forward, away from the lies and deceit that had tainted what I once considered family. It seemed strange to pack my life into boxes and to be seeing the events of someone else's narrative. The harsh reminder of how temporary everything was provided by the for sale sign outside the house. By midday, I was making myself at home in a little flat that felt more like an upgrade than a decrease. My phone rang that night when I was going through the relics of my former existence. I was no longer attached to Kevin's name as it flashed on the screen. I answered, curiosity winning out over bitterness. Kevin's voice seemed louder than normal, telling Linda to back off from Karen. Take a step back. I gave a sharp, frigid laugh. Kevin, not a chance. I want it back because she took it from me. Your sibling is a pilferer. Kevin was silent for a while. Her relatives, you could not comprehend. Relatives? I sneered. Kevin, that ship has sailed. You and your sister are merely folks I used to know, in my opinion. I interrupted him as he attempted to argue. Preserve it. I'm going to file charges if Karen doesn't return my money in 3 weeks. And you keep quiet about it. You now mean nothing to me. I felt a mixture of relief and melancholy after hanging up. My former love was only a memory at this point. The man I had once loved had turned into just one more thing standing in my way of getting my life back. 3 weeks later, my $50,000 was returned to me with a tap on the door. Karen was standing there, smirking, her posture belligerent. She spat, pushing the envelope into my hands and saying, Here's your money. You money-grubbing witch, happy now. Eyeing the envelope steadily, I took it. Karen, it's not about the money, I yelled. It concerns principles, about keeping your feet off other folks. Her laughter was empty and acrid. Anything that gets you to sleep at night. I yelled as she turned to walk away. Karen, never forget that karma exists. As they say, what goes around comes around. I leaned against the door as I closed it, the envelope heavy in my fingers. The money was really a minor triumph. The true achievement was defending my rights and refusing to fall prey to their deceit and greed. Life had settled into a new, more consistent pattern. Then my phone rang out of the blue. I hadn't seen the number on the screen in a long time. Kevin's voice called out to me from a time I had carefully archived. Hello, I need your help. A significant one. I hadn't realized how worn out Kevin's voice sounded. I hesitated, taken aback by the call's abruptness. A helping hand? Kevin, don't you think we were once favorites? Karen here. This time, she's in deep. The wolves are at the door, and she has debts up to her eyes. The house and the shop are the only things we sold. It is still insufficient. It took him a time to really get it. And why? Are you phoning me? Kevin, I'm not in the circus anymore. He let out a deep, desperate sigh. Please stop acting that way. You left and achieved great success in trade. Could you please spare something for the sake of the past? I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. He still thought of me as their mess's lifeline, even after everything. Will you perhaps spare her a little after her lies almost destroyed us? Kevin, you got some nerve. It's not exclusive to her. It's intended for everyone. Without me, you wouldn't be in this position. Remember that." He shot back, a hint of resentment in his voice. I let out a short, piercing laugh. "Not because of you, but in spite of you, is where I am. Do you believe I owe you anything?" That is quite wealthy. The line was silent, a heavy, uneasy quiet. "That's it then. Are you going to abandon us?" he inquired. "We, Kevin, we do not exist. It has been a while since there was. Regarding turning my back, I believe you have me confused with someone who is still compassionate." As I hung up, I had a range of feelings, including relief and fury. This closes that chapter of my life. I realized it was time to move on as I sat in the living room of my new home, a place that at last felt like home. I had worked hard and been determined to earn this. I became aware of my progress. This was my haven, constructed not by deceit and trickery, but by my own might and willpower. I was ejected from my mother-in-law's home because she didn't agree with my choice to give birth at my parents' house. With only my phone in hand, she aggressively took me out of my jammies before even letting me put on shoes. I made a quick call to my mother, who lived nearby, and I waited for her at a nearby diner. Upon discovering the occurrence, my mother and sister became enraged and promptly started activities that would soon cause problems for both my mother-in-law and my spouse. I am Emily, and I am 29 years old. I wigged 31-year-old Jerry a year ago. Jerry's father runs a big business, and he's being prepared to become the next CEO. He's working at one of their smaller branches right now to gain experience. Jerry and I met at work, and it wasn't until just before our wedding that I learned about his family's business empire. I was totally taken aback when he revealed that he was a candidate to become the next CEO. After he gave his explanation, everything seemed to fall into place, and I found myself married to a future CEO since he was so self-assured and popular. Jerry moved to the main office of the company after we were married, and I kept working. With an encouraging expression, my father-in-law told me, "I've heard you're a young leader at your workplace. Keep up the good work." My mother-in-law, on the other hand, had a different perspective and questioned why a wife would disregard her home in order to work. She was very much against me getting a job. I was mistaken when I assumed that living apart from Jerry's parents would prevent any disputes. When they said they wanted us to live together, that's when our problems started. Jerry loved our shared residence as well, especially after my father-in-law noted how busy he was and how beneficial it would be to have someone there to take care of things. "I've always lived here, and I'm worried about Mom. It just wouldn't work for me to move right now," he said. I was in a situation where I was unable to decline when they brought up the agreement. "Since everyone agrees it's a good idea, Emily, do you have any objections?" said my mother-in-law. I grudgingly consented to move in with my in-laws after feeling cornered. The issues started when we were all living together under one roof. Despite working full-time, my mother-in-law began to make my life very difficult by asking that I quit my job and take on all household responsibilities. She had already shown dislike of my job. She insisted that I redo my cleaning if she noticed any flaws, like a stray hair or a dust particle. I first made an effort to clean more carefully and apply her remarks constructively. Her inspection, nevertheless, went beyond ordinary cleaning tasks, since I felt she was also inspecting areas that weren't often cleaned, like between drawers or behind the TV. I eventually took a stand for myself. I'm not able to tidy these spaces every day. I operate in the same manner as Jerry. There's no need to redo everything today, because I'll clean things thoroughly on the weekends, right? My response enraged my mother-in-law. She yelled, "How dare you talk back to me like that?" She called Jerry in a fit of rage, saying I had yelled at her and misrepresented my advice as aggressive, all while shedding a few tears for impact. I hoped Jerry would get smart and defend me. "Emily is working too, Mom. Perhaps you might show a little more empathy," I assumed he would remark. But the truth was unsatisfactory. "What made you so angry with Mom?" He agreed with her, saying she was merely attempting to assist. This remark made clear how differently our family expects to be supported and behaved. "Why are you getting upset, Jerry?" I said. In the end, he took his mother's side. At that moment, I understood that my father-in-law was the only person in that family on whom I could rely. But his regular absences from work meant that I had to handle the tension on my own. I quickly discovered that confronting my mother-in-law would just result in arguments that left me feeling defeated, because she would always complain to Jerry, who would not provide any assistance. I decided that the best course of action was to get out of the path of the conflict, and that the only way to keep things somewhat peaceful was to become quieter. I used this tactic to get through the year until I started having health problems, which made me go to the doctor. I was not only sick. The diagnosis revealed that I was pregnant. I told Jerry first, feeling both hopeful and nervous about the family's response. "You are aware of my recent health issues. I saw the doctor, and you know what happened?" I said, "I'm pregnant." "That's fantastic. I guess I'm going to be a father now. I'm eager. Is the gender known yet?" Jerry gave an enthusiastic reply. "Not just yet. Do you find it important?" I asked, feeling that there were unspoken expectations on his part. "It does, of course." "There must be a boy," he proclaimed. Jerry, being the only kid, seemed to think it was essential to have a boy to carry on the family business. "What if it's a girl?" Concerned about how this may impact our family relations, I wondered out loud. "Never fear," he'd informed me. "I'm sure it's a boy," but I wasn't convinced. We made the decision to hold off on alerting the baby's parents until the gender was determined. I was ecstatic to learn we were expecting a girl and didn't want to reinforce any gender stereotypes. But Jerry's response was everything but enthusiastic. "A girl? Are you sure?" "Get it checked again," he said, disappointment clear in his voice. His reaction left me anxious about how his mother would take the news. Despite his initial disappointment, I dreaded the conversation with my mother-in-law, wondering how we would navigate the challenges that lay ahead. Eventually, we knew we couldn't keep the pregnancy a secret from the in-laws any longer. I gently nudged Jerry to share the news. "Well, I'm pregnant," he told them. My father-in-law's face lit up with joy. "That's wonderful, Emily. We're finally going to have our first grandchild," he exclaimed with genuine happiness. However, my mother-in-law's reaction was immediate and pointed. "So, what's the gender?" she inquired. With slight hesitation, I responded, "It's a girl." "A girl? Huh? I hope she's as lovely as you, Emily," my father-in-law said warmly, clearly not concerned about the gender. But my mother-in-law's disappointment was palpable. "A girl, not a boy. It has to be a boy to make sense for Jerry," she muttered under her breath. I was taken aback by her reaction. But before the tension could escalate, my father-in-law stepped in. "Honey, why would you say that? Whether it's a boy or a girl, they are still our grandchild. Can't you just be happy?" he chided her gently. She seemed subdued after his reprimand, but I sensed her change in mood wouldn't last. True enough, as soon as my father-in-law left for work the next day, she confronted me. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can slack off on the housework. You're not planning to quit your job, are you? If not, keep up with your chores. Pregnancy isn't an illness, you know. Hearing these words from another woman, particularly one who had been through pregnancy herself, was startling. It made me seriously consider whether staying here was the right choice for my child. My family's home's about a 4-hour train ride away. Since my dad passed away early, my mom and older sister have been living there together. Perhaps if I shared everything with them, they might welcome me to stay. I began to feel that giving birth at my in-laws' place might not be the safest or most supportive option. I remembered that my family's home could offer a better, more caring environment. I decided to call my mom immediately. "Mom, it's me, Emily." "What's up?" she replied. "It's rare for you to call. What's going on?" "I'm pregnant, and I was thinking, could I come home to give birth?" "You're pregnant? You should have told us sooner." "Congratulations. Of course, you can come home for the delivery. But have you talked this over with your in-laws yet?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Make sure you discuss it properly with them. If they agree, then I see no issue at all," Mom advised, stressing the importance of clear communication for the well-being of my baby. Encouraged by my mom's support, I decided to discuss the plan with my husband. "I'm thinking of going home for the birth," I mentioned casually. "Oh, going home for the birth? I guess that's fine," he responded nonchalantly. "My mom's here, so things should be okay around the house." His quick agreement surprised me, but anticipating potential resistance from my mother-in-law, I turned to my father-in-law. After some thought, I approached him. "I think it might be best for everyone if I went home for the delivery. Would that be all right?" He seemed surprised initially, but then reassured me. "If that's what you want, Emily, then it's probably the best decision. I won't oppose it. Could you perhaps speak to your wife on my behalf?" I asked timidly. "I'll tell her," he promised, seemingly supportive of my decision. With his backing, I secured permission to go home for the delivery without any issues. However, on the morning I was scheduled to leave, I woke up to find my packed luggage missing. My heart sank as both my husband and father-in-law had already left for work, leaving me no choice but to confront my mother-in-law. "Do you know where my luggage is?" I hesitated to ask. "Oh, that luggage? I got rid of it," she snapped. "I don't need a daughter-in-law who causes so much trouble. Don't ever come back," she shouted aggressively. Stunned by her harsh dismissal, I realized that returning to my family was not only a preference but a necessity for my peace and safety. As she pushed me out the front door, I barely had time to react. I hadn't even slipped on my shoes, clad in just my pajamas with only my smartphone in hand. I heard the front door lock behind me with a definitive click. It was a clear signal from my mother-in-law. She wanted me out, and there was no mistaking her seriousness. The thought struck me hard. If I lingered, that door might never open for me again. With this realization, I began to walk away, but the peak of summer made the barefoot journey outside nearly unbearable. Seeking some relief, I found refuge in a nearby diner. There, using the only possession I had, my phone, I called my mom. She was incensed by the situation and promised to arrive within an hour. Fortunately, she wasn't far away. I spent that anxious hour in the diner waiting for her. When my mom arrived, she didn't hesitate. She drove me straight back to our family home, where my sister was already waiting. I shared everything: the harsh actions of my mother-in-law and the apparent indifference of my husband. My mom and sister quietly exchanged words, their murmurs leaving me wondering about their conversation. The next morning, being back at my family home felt like a breath of fresh air. When I went to fetch the newspaper, I opened the door to an unexpected sight. My mother-in-law and husband were kneeling outside. "Emily, I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. Please don't sever ties with my husband's company," my mother-in-law pleaded. "Emily, I'm sorry too. Please, can we continue doing business with my dad's company?" my husband added, his voice filled with regret. Confused, I had no idea what they were talking about. Then suddenly, my mom and sister appeared from behind. "What on earth are you two doing, causing a scene this early?" my mom asked sternly, her voice cutting through the morning air. "What does resuming business mean?" she probed, wanting to understand their sudden change of heart. To avoid any further disturbance, my mom invited them inside. The atmosphere was tense, with unspoken questions hanging in the air. As we all stepped back into the house, once everyone was seated, my husband began to plead his case. "Would you please consider doing business again with my dad's company?" he asked. My mom and sister, who managed the company my late father had left behind, listened intently, curious about the details. I turned to my mom. "What does it mean that they're doing business with my father-in-law's company?" "Yes, they work with one of their subsidiary companies," my mom explained. "It's a major company within their group, second only to the main office, and their top client is your mom's company," my husband added, looking at me. This was news to me and apparently to my husband as well. I chuckled. That's news to me too. Reflecting further, I remembered something. Come to think of it, I recall my parents-in-law mentioning they've always been indebted to each other when they first met, I said. But the warmth of nostalgia quickly cooled when my mom interjected with firm resolve. "I cannot continue doing business with a family that would send my daughter out in such a state with just her phone. I'm stopping our business dealings." My mother-in-law begged fervently, "Please, I beg you," clearly shocked by my mom's revelation. "I'll take any action. Would you think about ending the business relationship with my husband's company again?" My sister chimed in at that point, grinning, saying, "You said you'd do anything, right? Thus, you'll consent to Emily's divorce. And of course, provide alimony and child support payments, correct?" Her words kept repeating in my head. I had discussed the matter with my husband only the day before. He answered in a contemptuous manner, "Isn't that what you deserve?" This insensitive comment had just strengthened my resolve. I found myself silently supporting my mother's choice. My love for my husband has completely vanished. If my sister hadn't brought up the topic so persuasively, I would have brought up divorce nevertheless. My sister's astute remark caused the dynamics of the conversation to sharply change in our favor. Reluctant as she was, my mother-in-law eventually questioned, "Will you resume business with my husband's company, even if it means agreeing to a divorce?" My mom took out her phone and made a call, grinning knowingly. She said over the phone, "It seems this lady here agrees to my daughter's divorce." My father-in-law's voice could be heard over the speaker, saying, "Got it. Jerry, you're fired, and I'm divorcing you, Maria." Those were the severe requirements he placed on starting up again. Additionally, my mother forcefully stated, "I cannot forgive the two of you for the way that you treated Emily. You two ought to be disciplined." My mother-in-law lost her spouse as a result of this unanticipated turn of events, and my husband also lost his job, money, and family support. The consequences persisted in the form of a contentious divorce between my in-laws, which was skillfully handled by my father-in-law's elite legal team. Assets were divided during the proceedings, and my mother-in-law ultimately compensated my husband and myself with a sizable amount. I also went ahead and got a divorce. It was no longer a possibility for me to live with a guy who was so influenced by his mother. My husband and mother-in-law caused me severe distress, and I was compensated for that as well as child support for our unborn kid. Their financial burden was so severe that they were forced to deplete their resources and ultimately incur debt. My now ex-husband found it difficult to find a new job in his prior area and eventually had to switch careers, moving into customer service, due to the strong influence of my mother and father-in-law. This highlighted the serious ramifications of the family strife and signaled a momentous and possibly humble shift in his career. But my ex-husband misjudged his new position in customer service, and he quickly received a lot of complaints, which resulted in his quick dismissal. He now lives with his mother and works 2 jobs a day to make ends meet. Thanks to my father-in-law's generosity, my mother-in-law and husband were formerly accustomed to a luxurious lifestyle. Nevertheless, they currently live in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. Their once close relationship has worsened, and they now dispute regularly. I occasionally ponder whether they still have joy or hope in their lives. With my mother and sister's assistance, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl at home in the interim. I'm excited to start a new chapter in my career and intend to join my mom's company as soon as things calm down. I did let my ex-husband know that our daughter had been born, but he hasn't said anything more or shown any interest. All I ask of him is that he pay his share of the child support due. I will not allow him to continue to be involved in our daughter's life going forward. Moving forward and enjoying a happy life with my daughter while having the love and support of my family is my main priority. The day we were supposed to leave for our honeymoon, Terry surprised me with divorce papers. He told me that he was going to take his whole family on what was meant to be our romantic retreat, and that I could break up with him if I didn't like the plan. I replied coolly, despite the fact that I was boiling with rage within. That's fine, but remember, I'm still my own person. His look of surprise made me feel like I had won. My name is Mia, and I work in real estate. I am 38 years old. I am appreciative of my coworkers' support and find my employment to be fulfilling. I have a successful career, but my personal life is very straightforward. I have never been in a relationship before and don't have many hobbies. Observing friends get married in their 30s, I couldn't help but feel left behind. The fact that I saw younger coworkers often departing our organization, which always hurt me, added to the pressure. Then we shared a friend, and I got to know Terry. He was 3 years my junior, yet his reassuring smile always gave me a sense of security and worth. Terry was a man of few words, someone who would much rather listen than lead discussions. Considering my lack of romantic experience, he was the first to make me feel valued and participated in decision-making. He also accepted my thoughts. He rapidly won my affection, and our relationship took off. When the subject of marriage was brought up, Terry's easy consent to move forward seemed right. Choosing our future house and organizing the wedding and honeymoon were just 2 of the many decisions we had to make as a married couple. It was going to be one of the big turning points in life, and I could not wait to go through it with him. Terry never offered an opinion when it came to decisions. Instead, he would just nod in agreement with my suggestions. I started to feel less content with our relationship as a result of Terry's personality starting to seem less dependable due to this trend. My contacts with my mother-in-law were another area of developing anxiety. She was exactly the reverse of Terry, who was laid back. She was outspoken and seldom gave my thoughts much thought. She was extremely clear about what she expected from us right from the start. Mia, you'll quit your job to take care of the family after you get married, right? You are not getting younger, and if you put off having kids for too long, you may not get them. Terry puts in a lot of work. Therefore, as his wife, you should commit to the family. She had firmly traditional beliefs, believing that the wife should take care of the house while her husband was at work. She was unaware that I really made more money than Terry did. His mother expressed her disapproval, noting that a lady who earns more than her husband is not charming, even though he didn't object and had already told them about it. Can you even handle home tasks? In addition, she expressed doubts about my capacity to clean, cook, do laundry, and take care of my husband's health in a condescending manner. Despite her critical remarks, I knew that after years of living on my own, I was more than capable of taking care of domestic duties. After getting married, I was adamant that I would continue working because I wanted to put my goals and Terry's goals first. But when my mother-in-law chastised me, Terry said nothing, just nodded in agreement. I started to wonder if I could rely on him as a lifetime spouse after receiving this indifferent response. A part of me questioned whether Terry's youth played a role, thinking maybe with time he might develop into a more self-assured and encouraging companion. But there was also the worry that I might never be married at all if this marriage didn't work out. There was a mental battle going on in my head between hope and worry, but time was of the essence. My stress level increased as the list of tasks for the wedding, honeymoon, and scheduling time off work kept growing. There was still a lot of preparing left for the wedding. As I juggled busy days full of wedding plans and job obligations, the uneasiness persisted. I said to Terry one day that we were only able to take a lengthy vacation very soon because of our job schedules, and I brought up our honeymoon plans. Should we plan our honeymoon during this period? I asked him. Yes, that seems agreeable to me, Terry answered. Luckily, we both had similar downtimes at work, so this was our greatest opportunity to take a longer break. But there was a problem with our wedding arrangements. The location of my dreams was completely reserved for the upcoming year due to its immense popularity. What do you think about having the honeymoon before the wedding? I made a suggestion. I had read that this was a popular choice among couples. It might take us an additional 3 years to go on our trip if we put off getting married. Terry said, I'm cool with it too if you're cool with it, Mia. Terry's easy assent made me wish he would speak up more, but I was happy he didn't disagree. Part of me was relieved that there was no resistance, but I kept going forward with our objectives. In the end, we chose to go to Europe for our honeymoon. I couldn't decide between the great cultural diversity of Europe and the close proximity and convenience of Florida. I finally decided on Italy after being seduced by the thought of eating delicious food and meandering through picturesque alleys. In addition, I was excited to go around chic accessory stores in the area and maybe buy some unique dinnerware to mark the beginning of our new life together. It took me a month or so to finish all the arrangements after considering several timetables and locations. I could feel my excitement by then. I was excited to travel abroad for the first time with Terry, thinking that the experience would strengthen our bond and inspire him to open up to me more in the future. The excitement of organizing our honeymoon in Europe utterly enthralled me. Excitedly, I spent my days planning our itinerary and choosing the necessities for our trip. Any resentment I had toward Terry was immediately swept away by this exhilaration. But a week before we left, Terry took me by surprise with a request that piqued my interest. Considering how infrequently he requested for anything, could it have to do with our trip? Maybe he wanted to check out a new location he discovered in Venice. I eagerly inquired about his thoughts. Terry casually dropped a surprise. When we're in Venice, I want to visit Bing Taylor. Mom is quite eager to see it. His statement stunned and perplexed me. Your mom? What do you mean, wait? Terry pretended as though everything was as usual, even though I found it difficult to keep up with this abrupt change in schedule. Well, since everyone else is going, we'll all be together during the trip, right? Everyone? What do you mean by everyone? It's our honeymoon, so obviously, it should be just the two of us, I countered. But Terry continued, my mom thinks it's normal for the whole family to come along. I was flustered. Terry, I made reservations for just the two of us, and the deadline to book was a few days ago. Today is the last day to confirm. I'd booked for us alone. The whole family can't join now. If you think something can be worked out, you might want to talk to the travel agency. Before I could grasp the full implication of Terry's words, the intercom buzzed. On the screen, I saw my in-laws' bags and towel, completely disregarding my stunned expression as they entered our home. My mother-in-law's eyes gleamed with excitement as she exclaimed, I thought I'd leave the luggage here since we're leaving soon. Terry chimed in supportively, just leave the luggage here, and began ushering them into the room without my consent. Panicking, I blurted out, wait a minute, as I tried to intercept him, desperate to regain some control over the spiraling situation. I was trying to process the sudden upheaval of our honeymoon plans. My mother-in-law shot me a sharp look, her tone dismissive. What's the matter, Mia? I hope you're not suddenly saying you don't want us to go together, she challenged. I never agreed to this in the first place, I retorted, but she barely acknowledged my response. Instead, she turned to Terry, seeking his support. You heard her. She just said no. But you always thought we would go together, right? She coaxed him. Terry, seemingly caught in the middle, simply nodded and replied, yeah, affirming her presumption. Seizing on his agreement, my mother-in-law continued, overriding my objections. It's normal for the husband's parents to accompany the couple on their honeymoon. Don't you have common sense? I hope you won't ruin this trip with any unpleasantness. We want to make good memories, right? I'll make sure to teach you some common sense this week before we leave. It's a special honeymoon, after all. Feeling like the world was crumbling around me, my frustration boiled over. This is a honeymoon, you know. Normally, it's just supposed to be the husband and wife. I insisted, desperately trying to make her understand the traditional privacy expected on such an occasion. However, my mother-in-law was unyielding. The husband's parents joining the honeymoon is just common sense. I can't believe you don't want to be with us. I thought we were becoming a family. But it seems our ideas of common sense are different. You don't seem to like me, and nothing seems to match. How sad, she lamented. Her eyebrows furrowed in what appeared to be contrived disappointment. Her words dripped with insincerity, and I was certain she was manipulating the situation. Even Terry, without questioning the normalcy of the situation, sided with her based on her coaxing alone. Maya, what's wrong with you? They're my parents, he said, aligning himself with her narrative, leaving me to feel isolated and misunderstood in what was rapidly becoming a family versus individual conflict. It's not possible for us all to go together on the honeymoon, I stated firmly. We've already made reservations for just the two of us, and honestly, I'd never heard of families joining a honeymoon. Terry's response was immediate and heated, his frustration boiling over. I can't believe you dislike my parents so much, Mia. That's enough for today. he snapped, disbelief clouding his features as he spoke. A triumphant grin spread across my mother-in-law's face. It stung to see Terry consistently siding with his mother, without considering my feelings, especially in such a personal matter. Before I could respond, I found myself being ushered towards the door. As it swung closed behind me, the last thing I saw was my mother-in-law's smug expression. Standing outside, I felt utterly powerless and wronged. Why was I being portrayed as the villain? Why did this special trip have to be overshadowed by such conflict? Overwhelmed by frustration and sadness, tears streamed down my face. A few hours later, a message from Terry pinged on my phone. I want you to check if it's still possible for them to join the tour. If not, we'll cancel this trip and find one where all 4 of us can go. Please think rationally so we can sort this out properly. I was dumbfounded. His words implied that the fault lay with me, offering no room for apology or discussion. Terry had not contacted me since, likely upsetting himself. Time passed slowly, and soon the day we were supposed to depart for our honeymoon arrived. Despite my emotional turmoil, I had spent a month preparing for this trip and felt I couldn't just walk away. As I was getting ready, the intercom buzzed. It was Terry coming to pick me up. We hadn't seen each other since the argument, and I was unsure how to act around him. His arrival should have signaled that we were still going on the trip together, but oddly, he carried no luggage. Instead, he extended an envelope to me. It contained divorce papers. After hurting my parents, you still plan to go on this trip, don't you? He accused. I'm taking my whole family on this honeymoon. His remarks pierced deeply, leaving me in shock at the abruptly harsh conclusion of what should have been the best period of our life. We should just file for divorce if you don't like it. My mother suggested that technique, Terry replied, thrusting the divorce documents in my direction. His genuine personality was very evident at that point. I used to think of him as a nice and thoughtful person, and I thought he would listen to my worries and put my feelings first. But as it turned out, he was a very private person who always gave his family's wants precedence over mine. This was Terry, as he really was. My love for him began to wane as this awareness dawned. It seemed hard to think of joining a household with a controlling mother-in-law, and marrying him seemed even more scary. I looked at the divorce papers he had thrown in front of me, and, with renewed resolution, I answered coolly, "Sure, but remember, I'm still single." "Alone? What do you mean?" Terry cried out, surprised at my answer. "Did you not pay attention? We discussed taking a honeymoon, but waiting until the day of the wedding to register the marriage legally. Terry, I made sure to gain your approval for it. I mean, you didn't forget. You said, if you're fine with it, then I'm fine too. And the marriage license is still in the drawer." "Yes, it is correct. We're not even married yet, divorce or not." I reminded him that there was nothing wrong with using my maiden name while on the honeymoon. Terry's expression flashed back and forth, then reddened as he raised his voice in exasperation. "Are you crazy enough to abandon your spouse for no apparent reason other than a honeymoon? Grab hold of anything." I shot back, my forceful voice matching Terry's passion. "This is my attempt at reason. I have been so consumed with my desire to marry that I have been oblivious to the realities of our circumstances. Marrying someone who doesn't support or listen to their partner's thoughts will not make me happy. I'd prefer to remain unmarried forever. I appreciate you letting me realize that hurrying leads to waste. Hey Mia, let's calm down and start over, okay?" Terry seemed to be on the point of tears as his eyes welled up and his voice cracked, but his entreaties no longer affected me. I had resolved to end this cycle of negativity. I told him, raising my voice, "Take your family of 3, if you're so anxious for a family vacation. But this time, you'll be in charge of everything, including scheduling the tour and creating the schedule. It's about time you realized how difficult it is to handle everything by yourself. You indecisive man, go ahead if you think you can manage it." I took the marriage certificate out of the drawer and tore it up in front of him, making a firm statement. His jaw dropped to reveal my resolve, astounded. "Are you aware of how serious I am right now? I will not allow my future to be damaged. We've had enough. You mama's boy. Why don't you return to your cherished mother and weep with her?" Terry was left completely dumbfounded as I forcefully closed the front door. He may very easily go cry to his mother based on the look on his face. I could see it unfolding with ease. So I knew I made the proper choice. I contacted the trip operator to request that our bookings be canceled following the consequences. We were billed the entire amount because we had to cancel the same day. Terry received the bill I sent in whole. Considering how his actions had derailed our goals, it felt only just. It seemed like the proper course of action. Terry went on to spread gossip about me to our friends and coworkers, accusing me of being the reason our marriage failed. But it didn't seem like anyone was rooting for him. He began to be perceived by our family and colleagues as an unusual mama's boy. His recent behavior has only served to solidify this perception, and as a result, many people hold a negative opinion of him. My parents were shocked when I told them about the divorce, but they soon warmed up. "Maya, marriage isn't the only path to happiness." My mother comforted me. "What matters is that you're happy." I was so grateful for her words, which were like a balm to my soul. Strangely enough, this entire experience rekindled my love of travel. I went on my first solo trip after deciding it would be a pity to waste my vacation days. Although at first intimidating, traveling alone abroad proved to be immensely rewarding. I discovered that traveling alone was actually rather pleasurable as I explored historic cities that I had always wanted to see. This trip gave me confidence, and I now eagerly embrace going places by myself anytime I have free time. I am making travel plans for more, and I'm already thinking about my next vacation spot. Freedom and exploration characterize this new chapter in my life. It's a road unrestricted by the goals or expectations of others.